London. So there's lots I want to do to help people like me and the millions of other Londoners.
Welcome. You may or may not know, but the London mayoral elections has kicked off. In May, we should be choosing who our new mayor is going to be. We have candidates from all the major political parties competing for your vote to become the next mayor. Today, we have the opportunity to speak to Sean Berry, representing, of course, the Green Party. Well, let's have a conversation and find out if she is indeed going to speak the language that you want to hear. Hi, Sean.
Hi.
How are you?
Great, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for affording us the time.
No problem.
Now, you know, there are 5 big main subject areas where this campaign is concerned. One of those subject areas is housing. Housing is a major issue for most people that live in London. Major in the sense that there aren't enough housing, and for what is available, it's not affordable. What will you be doing to make that comfortable for Londoners?
Well, it's a very, very complicated problem, and it comes out of lots of different factors. I am at the front line of this myself. I rent my own house.
Okay.
And like I said, that's just a house. It's a tiny flat, basically, and it costs an absolute fortune.
Yes.
Up until recently, it was costing me about half my salary, and I've often sat there and wondered, you know, the next rent rise, will I be forced to move out of London? And I've looked at moving out, further out of London and to Zone 6 and places like that. And the amount you save in rent disappears immediately in the amount you have to pay extra to get into central London. So there's lots I want to do to help people like me and the millions of other Londoners who are renters. Okay. Last week we announced that we're going to help with City Hall money set up a union for renters. And I think it's really important that the current rules that we have for landlords are enforced. We have a lot of dodgy lettings agents. We have a lot of landlords who are buy-to-let landlords who are just amateurs at it. It's not like they're malicious, but they get a lot of things wrong. And we need to help renters to stand up for their own rights and get a better deal, and longer leases and lower rent rises. And I think by organising people together, by backing a union to be set up by the amazing renters groups that already exist around London, we can make a real difference there. But the key thing is we've got to bring the rents down. Rent rises are going up. They've gone up 11% since 2012, and our wages have gone up 1%. Now that's not sustainable. Eventually we'll all have to leave. London will break. It's a structural problem. So we need rent controls, and I've been pushing MPs, I've been writing to the Chancellor, I'm going to write to the Chancellor again for this year's budget to say we need the powers to bring in rent controls. And the Housing and Planning Bill that came to Parliament recently and is still going through, Caroline Lucas, our MP in Parliament, has been putting forward an amendment to bring in a commission to look at what a living rent will be. The other issue we have is new developments. There's 2 things here. One is redeveloping council estates. That is proving we can't build any affordable homes, and you kind of go, well, you're double counting your profits there. You know, the fact that so yeah, we need much more transparency in viability assessments. We need a target that the mayor is prepared to enforce, because we can't let our precious land go just to private investments that people buy just to own and don't often live in or even rent out. But it's a complete waste.
But the private investments make more money for the government.
Well, no, not really, because a lot of these private owners are based abroad. There's an amazing map that came out recently of people, of homes that are owned by trusts held abroad. The profits they make, we don't see a penny of tax from those.
So what would you do in situations like that to change something like that in order to provide more available housing?
Well, the London plan is very, this is the planning document that governs new developments across London. It's actually quite powerful. Okay. You have to justify the policies that you put in there. You need to provide evidence that they're needed, but you can put in powers like prohibiting buy-to-let, buy-to-leave, putting controls on rents. For all new developments, we can do quite a lot of control over that, as long as we can justify it to the planning inspector. And that's a real job for the next mayor. The London plan needs renewing, and I want to work with communities right across London to make sure it's full of the right policies.
Okay. Now, you made mention of transport there, another key area for Londoners. It gets more and more expensive every year. Your opponents are talking about freezing, for instance, for the Labour, although Conservative tells us, well, he's not ready to make that decision yet, because he doesn't want to make a promise that he can't keep. what would you do? What would the Green Party do to ensure that we can still afford travel, even though our salaries are not going up?
Right, so our policy on fares is
Yeah.
basically a revolution. We want to flatten fares. We think having a zone structure where it gets more and more expensive the further out you live, and that's actually, with people being forced further out of London, that's just adding to their costs when they can't afford it anyway. So what we want to do is make everyone's journey to work cost the same. We will have one zone for London by 2025. We've run the figures. We know it's possible. And we'd merge zones 5 and 6 and zones 3 and 4 immediately to cut down the number of zones and make it immediately cheaper for everyone in outer London next year. The plan to flatten, it does take money out of the fare box, which is the money that's needed for investment. But we're not, unlike the other parties, we're not afraid to say that we think people in cars should be contributing more towards London's transport investment budget.
Are people in cars not paying so much already?
No, at the moment, 40% of Transport for London's budget comes from fare payers, 2.5% comes from car drivers via the congestion charge. So we're talking about actually quite a small rebalancing of that balance.
But then, we still pay taxes on our cars, we're still paying through the petrol, we're still paying through MOT and all those other things that we must do.
So some of that money is
just because
paid.
we're not paying through, more through the congestion charge, as it were, does it change the fact that we're paying more? Will that not be more of a tax on the car owner?
And we want to rebalance things a little bit more, because it isn't fair that people in cars are taking up so much road space when buses are held up. I mean, I was a bit late coming here to the town hall because the bus was held up in traffic around King's Cross. Now, if there were slightly fewer private cars using up the roads there, if more of the people in private cars were encouraged to use the buses and the tubes by lower fares and by a slight nudge in the right direction by a congestion charge that covers all of London, not the same as the current congestion charge, it'd be much less to drive in outer London. But even so, we think people should pay a little bit more towards our transport budget. And there's also the money that you already pay that you mentioned.
Yes.
The vehicle excise duty. That's being changed into what's being called a road fund from next year.
Okay.
And I've been arguing that London needs some of that money. It's going to go to the Highways England, who manage the motorways at the moment. But actually our main roads in London are managed by TfL. So we deserve some of the money that drivers already pay as well. And some of that will go towards our fare cut as well.
Okay. Now, we've talked about the housing, we've talked about transport, and of course you made mention there the wages that we earn here in London. 0-hour contracts are ruling the day currently. What will you be doing? I know the Green Party were the first to mention the living wage for Londoners, but what will you be doing as mayor, if that were the case, to ensure that Londoners are earning sufficiently to be able to, afford their living within London?
So we've done a lot through City Hall already. Like you mentioned, the Greens and City Hall are the first to get the living wage unit created, which calculates the living wage level for London. And City Hall and lots of councils, including Camden Council, where I'm a councillor, we all pay the living wage to our own staff, and we make sure that the contractors who provide services on behalf of the council and City Hall all pay the living wage as well.
Okay.
Now, it shouldn't end there, though. There's a lot more that goes on through City Hall and through councils via purchasing. So instead of contracting out services, we also buy a lot of things into the council and into City Hall.
Now, we've talked about the living wage, but what would you do for Londoners with the 0-hour contracts? Because 0-hour contracts means we call you in as at when we want. There are no guarantees that you will work this week or next week or for a whole month. And that's a real problem for a lot of families. What would you be doing as mayor to reduce that, limit that, prevent it?
Well, again, through City Hall and council procurement policies, we can do a lot to remove 0-hours contracts.
Okay.
But I think we also need a campaigning mayor, somebody who'll stand up and name and shame companies that are doing this. We don't necessarily have the power as the mayor or the London Assembly to enforce this, but we can draw attention to the problem. We can help employees to get together, campaign. We can support unions when they're fighting these battles, because I think 0-hours contracts are a really, really worrying development actually, and they need to be stamped out because they're no good for anybody.
No. We've talked about all of that. Crime.